Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper read. Today we shall be discussing the Hindu newspaper dated 10th November 2019 of New Delhi edition. Topics to be discussed today is presented on the screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. Now let's start our today's analysis. Now, in a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court has finally put an end to the longest and most contentious political and socio religious battle in the history of India. The apex court, in its verdict in the Ayodhya title dispute case, has upheld the secular ethos of our constitution that envisages equality of all forms of belief, worship, and prayer, and has set an example as to how, in a pluralistic society like India, it is the constitution that serves as the guiding light to the peaceful coexistence of all citizens, cutting across the barriers of religion, creed, beliefs, and faith. Now, as a part of this news analysis, I'll be discussing the historic Ayodhya verdict, a brief background to the Ayodhya title dispute case, the key highlights of the verdict, and details into the constitutional provisions that have been invoked by the apex court in its 1,000-page judgment, and how the decision upholds the secular ethos that forms the bedrock of a multicultural society like India. Now, in this context, multiple news appears, including the headline on page number 1 under the title Temple at Disputed Site, Mosque Within Ayodhya Rules Supreme Court. Now, in this context, this news becomes important from the perspective of mains examination, including General Studies Paper 1, 2, and 4, under the heads Communalism and Secularism under Paper 1, Constitutionalism under Paper 2, and Laws, Rules, and Regulations as Source of Ethical Guidance under General Studies Paper 4. Now, in short, in this historic verdict, the apex court has held that the 2.77 acre disputed land in Ayodhya shall be allotted for the construction of Ram Mandir, and at the same time an alternative land in Ayodhya be allotted for the construction of mosque in order to remedy the historic wrongs that has been instituted on the Muslim community. Now, before we look into the highlights of the verdict, it is to be noted that in a multi-religious country like ours, claims over property by different religious communities and thus the title disputes are inevitable. And Ayodhya is the best example, so much so that the Ayodhya title dispute case coincides with the history of communalism in post-independent India. Now, the first of such communal clashes occurred in 1949 when the mosque was desecrated and an idol of Ram Lalla was placed under the dome of the mosque. Now, following this communal clash, a number of title suits were filed starting from 1950s claiming the title of the disputed site. While the title suits were still pending in the court, the worst of the communal violence in India culminated in the form of the demolition of the mosque in 1992, leading to widespread communal clashes in the country, including the Mumbai bomb blasts in the following year. Now, as a result, the central government in 1993 passed the Ayodhya Acquisition Act to acquire the disputed area and its adjacent areas. Meanwhile, in 2010, the Allahabad High Court, in its judgment over the title dispute case, had trifurcated the disputed site among two Hindu plaintiffs and one Muslim plaintiff. Now, in its historic judgment, the apex court has opined that this judgment of the Allahabad High Court is unsustainable for peaceful coexistence and allotted the disputed land of 2.77 acres to the Hindu plaintiffs, and in order to remedy the historic wrongs on the Muslims, has allotted an alternate land in a prime place in Ayodhya for construction of a mosque. Now, before we look into the key constitutional provisions that the court has invoked in delivering this verdict, it is important to note that the Supreme Court, in its 1,000-page judgment, has clearly mentioned that since the matter in this case relates to immovable property, it has adjudicated the case based primarily on the evidence in the title suits rather than on the basis of any faith or belief. Further, the court has observed, according to the evidence from various sources, including archaeology, textual sources, etc., the claim of the Hindu plaintiffs to the disputed property stands on better footing than the evidence produced by the Muslim plaintiffs. Therefore, the disputed property of 2.77 acres has been allotted for the construction of the temple. As a result, the judgment should not be seen as a victory by any section of the society, but purely as a victory of a party which had better evidence. Accordingly, the court has put the onus on the central government to constitute a trust within 3 months and hand over this disputed site to the trust. Besides, the government will also make necessary provisions under the Ayodhya Act of 1993 for the management of this so formed trust and the powers of the trustees in matter relating to construction and management of the temple. Further, the court also highlighted that the desecration of the mosque in 1949 and the demolition of the mosque in 1992 amounted to dispossession of the Muslims from the mosque and should not have occurred in a secular nation like India. Thus, in order to remedy this wrong and justice to prevail, the Supreme Court, in pursuance of Article 142, has allotted an alternative land of 5 acres for the construction of the mosque, upholding the rule of law in the country. Accordingly, this alternate land for the construction of the mosque shall be allotted either by the central government or the state government. Further, the court observes, in a multicultural country like India, in which multiple strands of history, ideologies, and religion can compete, it is the law that is the edifice upon which a secular society is built. Accordingly, all faiths, beliefs, and practices are subject to law and equal before the law in accordance with Article 14 of the Constitution. By subjecting all faiths, beliefs, and practices to law, the court has reiterated that the judgment or the verdict is not a victory to any community or religious denomination, but a mere upholding of the law. Further, by recognizing the historic wrong done and subsequent relief given in the form of an alternate land, the court has invoked Article 25, Clause 2, under which the state can regulate the secular affairs of the religion, which essentially is the Indian concept of secularism, that is, positive concept of secularism. Now, while in the Western countries, secularism means a clear separation of religion and politics, in India, it has a much larger connotation of equal reverence to all religion and consequent religious freedom and tolerance. Further, while Article 25 guarantees to all persons the right to profess, propagate, and practice any religion, it is subject to public order, morality, and health. As a result, the court has observed that the desecration and the demolition of the mosque tantamounts to violation of the law, which is against the fundamental tenets of rule of law in Indian constitution. Further, the court has directed the central government, as mentioned before, to form a trust and also to provide an alternate land for construction of the mosque in accordance with special powers under Article 142 of the Constitution. Now, under Article 142 of the Constitution, the Supreme Court may pass any decree or make any such order and direct the central government or the executive to take up any step as is necessary for the complete delivery of justice. As a result, in short, the constitutional provisions that have been invoked in delivering of this verdict include Article 25, Clause 2 relating to secularism, Article 14 relating to equality before law, Article 142 the special powers of the Supreme Court in order to do complete justice, and the rule of law a secular polity like India rests on. As a result, in conclusion, by adjudicating the case purely on the basis of law and evidence and correcting the historical wrong done on a certain community, the court has affirmed that it is the values of tolerance and mutual coexistence that nourish the secular ethos that is not only a part of basic structure of our constitution but also an inseparable feature of a pluralistic society we live in. Now, having understood the issue in detail, it must be noted that the discussion was confined purely from the perspective of different sections of the syllabus of the examination. While it is highly unlikely that there can be a separate question on the Ayodhya dispute, the wide ranging impact that the decision has on different aspects of our socio political life makes this topic relevant from the exam perspective. Now, a number of questions in the previous years have been asked on the related topics that we have discussed, especially in the mains examination. Now, as you can see in 2014, in General Studies Paper 1, there was a question on the difference between Indian version of secularism and Western version of secularism for 10 marks. And this question was again repeated in the year 2018, in that the question read how the Indian concept of secularism is different from Western concept of secularism. Besides, in 2019, in General Studies Paper 2, a question appeared which read, what can France learn from Indian constitution's approach to secularism, which is effectively a different way of asking the difference between Indian conception of secularism and Western conception of secularism. For instance, cases like Charlie Hebdo cannot occur in India due to the fact that, in accordance with Article 25, Clause 2, the state can regulate the secular aspects of religion, which can ensure that the belief of one citizen does not interfere or dominate with the freedom and belief of another. Besides, there was a prelims question on Article 142 in 2019 prelims paper. Now, as it is clear from our discussion, the answer to this question is B. With this, let us move to the next topic. Now, this article appears on page number 17 and relates to antimicrobial resistance. Now, it is generally believed that overprescription of drugs by doctors is one of the main reasons for developing antimicrobial resistance. However, the article points out that this reason is over exaggerated, as the cases of antimicrobial resistance due to overprescription is just less than 10%. As a result, in order to fight antimicrobial resistance effectively, we must focus our attention on causes that have more propensity to develop antimicrobial resistance, like over the counter sales, use of antibiotics in livestock, etc. Now, in this news analysis, we will be discussing what is antimicrobial resistance, causes behind the rapid spread of antimicrobial resistance, and steps that India has taken to fight antimicrobial resistance. Now, as to what antimicrobial resistance is, you must be aware that antibiotics are basically medicines that are produced using microbes that compete with the disease causing microbes in the body. Now, these microbes in the antibiotics is said to have superior ability to absorb nutrients and starve out the disease causing microbes in the body. Now, if the bacteria has become resistant to these antibiotics, it is said to have developed antimicrobial resistance or antibiotic resistance. And thus, the antibiotics are no longer effective in competing with the disease causing bacteria. Further, if this bacteria has developed resistance to multiple antibiotics, these are called as superbugs. Besides, these bacteria which have developed antibiotic resistance pass the resistant gene both horizontally and vertically, meaning which the antibiotic resistant gene is passed on to offsprings by way of binary fusion, which is asexual reproduction, and also by way of conjugation, which is horizontal passing on of resistant gene between bacteria during sexual reproduction. Now let's take a look at some of the common causes for spread of this antibiotic resistance in India. Now, unregulated use of antibiotics using self-medication, over-the-counter medication, including overprescribing by doctors, incomplete antibiotic dosage, rampant use of antibiotic in agriculture and livestock for the purpose of faster growth of animals, especially in poultry. For example, antibiotics such as tylosin and colistin is commonly sold as growth promoter for chicken. And lastly, bad sanitation practices which results in rapid growth of this disease resistant strains in environment. Now, as to steps to fight antimicrobial resistance, the WHO in 2015 launched the GLASS surveillance system, which helps to strengthen the evidence base on antimicrobial resistance and help informing decision making and drive national, regional, and global actions. India enrolled in GLASS program in 2015. Besides, India has also launched the Red Line campaign to curb the over-the-counter sale of antibiotic drugs. The idea here is to put a red line on the antibiotic packages to curb their over-the-counter sales. Besides, in 2017, India launched the National Action Plan to combat antimicrobial resistance. Now, the National Action Plan seeks to enhance the awareness of unregulated antibiotic use, strengthen the surveillance in accordance with the GLASS program of WHO, improving rational use of antibiotics by persuading the doctors to prescribe only on the basis of evidence, and promoting research in order to fight the antibiotic resistance in India. Now, having understood the issue of antibiotic resistance in detail, let's move to the next news. Now, this article appears in the context of successful tiger conservation efforts being taken in the Nagarjun Sagar Sri Sailam Tiger Reserve in Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, which has resulted in increase in the number of tigers from 68 in 2014 to 74 today. The conservation efforts being taken by the Tiger Conservation Foundation has led to the boost in the tiger numbers. Now, this article becomes important from the perspective of a preliminary examination where often questions are asked based on the location of tiger reserve, the tribes that inhabit the region, the river that passes tiger reserve, and the like. Now, before we look into the details of the Nagarjun Sagar Sri Sailam Tiger Reserve, it's important to note that the number of tigers in Andhra Pradesh was on a continuous decline from 95 tigers in 2006 to about 68 in 2014. Now, as a result of conservation efforts from Tiger Conservation Foundation, like hike in the environment maintenance charges, increase in funds for anti-poaching activities, and levy of a toll for both light vehicles and heavy vehicles that are passing through the tiger reserve has resulted in an increase in the number of tigers from 68 to about 74 today. Now, it should be noted that the provision for Tiger Conservation Foundation at state levels is provided for in the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 for implementation of Project Tiger at the state level. Accordingly, the states are to establish the Tiger Conservation Foundation as a statutory body with administrative authority to foster ecotourism in order to generate funds for ecological development and conservation activities in the tiger reserve. As to the location and other details of Nagarjuna Sagar Sri Sailam Tiger Reserve, now this is one of the largest tiger reserves spread over about 5 districts of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana and situated at Nallamala Hills in the Eastern Ghats. Besides, River Krishna forms the northernmost boundary of the tiger reserve, and the tiger reserve is inhabited by the Chenchu tribes. In the aftermath of bifurcation of the state into Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, the northern part of the tiger reserve falls in the Telangana state and is called as Amrabad Tiger Reserve today. Now, this data was in accordance with the 4th tiger census that was undertaken recently and the report released in July 2019, which has been comprehensively covered under the DNS analysis of 30th July 2019 by Mehak Ma'am, and the link of which is given in the description box below. Now, it is commonly known that the natural vegetation of a place is determined by the climate of the place, including temperature and rainfall, and the latitude of the place. But the Meghalayan rainforests that are known to throw surprises is said to exhibit the properties of rainforests of the equatorial region despite being at a latitude much above Tropic of Cancer at about 25° north latitude. Now, in this context, this news appears on page number 17 and relates to a report that has been recently released, which has concluded that the rainforests of Meghalaya are similar to equatorial ones on the basis of the natural vegetation found in the region. In that, in 2015, a question was asked in the preliminary examination related to a living root that is used as bridges in Meghalaya. And therefore, this news becomes important from the perspective of prelims examination. Now, the study that is the subject matter of this article has revealed that about 95% of the forest in Meghalaya constitutes tropical Asian species that are mostly found in the hot equatorial climate between 10° north and 10° south latitude. Besides, Meghalaya has high tree density, that is the characteristic feature of hot wet equatorial forests. Besides, it has high proportion of rare species and high biodiversity ranging from legumes to flowering plants. Now let us have a quick look at the characteristic features of the rainforests in the equatorial region. Now, in so far as the equatorial rainforests are concerned, they lie between the latitudes 10° north to 10° south. Now, being at the equator, equatorial rainforests have temperatures ranging from 20 to 25° with extremely low annual range. Besides, the rainfall is uniform throughout the year. Now, given the high biodiversity of the region, the soil is extremely acidic and is subject to heavy leaching as a result of hot and humid climate. Now, as a result of this heavy leaching, the soil is extremely poor in nutrients. Now, with favorable climatic conditions, the forests are known to be multi-layered. Now, again, such questions have been asked previously in the UPSC prelims examination, in that the characteristics of the region is given and one is asked to identify the name of the region. So, in short, the relevance of this news article for the examination is the special characteristics of the Meghalayan rainforests, in that they are very similar to the hot equatorial rainforests, and the characteristics of the equatorial rainforests in general. Now, this article appears on page number 9 under the title Maternal Mortality Ratio Falls Further in Tamil Nadu. The article relates to the sample registration system, which showed that maternal mortality ratio of India has come down and becomes important from the perspective of General Studies Paper 2 under the head Social Justice and issues related to management of health. Now, this topic was covered as a part of DNS analysis of 9th November 2019 by Naved sir, and the link for which is given in the description below. Based on today's discussion, these are the 4 practice questions for prelims. Please attempt to answer these questions. We shall be discussing the answers for these questions after 5 seconds. Now, the first question reads, which of the following tiger reserves are located in the state of Telangana? The first option is Amrabad Tiger Reserve, that was the subject matter of today's news. The second is Kaval Tiger Reserve, which also is situated in the state of Telangana. The third option is Dandeli Anchi Tiger Reserve, which is a part of Karnataka and therefore the wrong option. Hence, the right answer for this question is B, 1 and 2 only. Now, coming to the second question, which of the following terms have been added to the preamble of Indian Constitution through the 42nd Amendment Act? First option is socialist, which is correct. The second is secular, which is also correct. Now, justice was a part of the preamble in the original form and hence economic justice is the wrong option. Therefore, the right option among this is 1 and 2 only. Therefore, the answer is B. Now, the third question reads, which of the following are the characteristics of equatorial rainforests? Hot and humid climate, which is true. High annual temperature range, which is false. As we have discussed, equatorial rainforests have low temperature range between 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. Soil rich in nutrients, which is also wrong. The nutrients in the soil in equatorial region is poor on account of heavy leaching. Multi-layered canopy, which is the right option. Hence, the right option is option C, which is 1 and 4. Now, the fourth question reads, with which among the following groups of countries is India presently negotiating a bilateral trade and investment agreement? Now, this is based on a news that appears on page number 16 under the title India EU to push for free trade pact again, and hence the right option is C, European Union. With this, we come to the end of today's discussion. Now, let's take up the question for the day.